Hi, Tamalyn.
Hello.
You look beautiful today. By the way, I like that shirt. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful.
A
So,
different look for me.
yes, exactly. I want to share about your journey now that you've went through South America, and you mentioned that now you decided to go to New York, and what made you want to go to New York, and what was the whole intention behind it?
Well, I always wanted to go study in New York. I had made a few trips there a couple of trips when I lived in Miami. And when you go back to the 70s, when I started in 1976, there were five big names in belly dance across the country. They were Jamila Salampur in California, Dalena in Chicago, Serena Wilson in New York, Morocco in New York, and Ibrahim Farhat in New York. So that's three out of five in New York. So I said, one day I want to move to New York for a little while and study with all three of them. And so when I came back from South America, I was like, okay, I can reestablish myself in Miami. I've been gone for 2 years. But I said, this is the time that I'm free to go to New York. So it wasn't easy, as nothing is easy. So I came back from Miami really with no money. I took the Greyhound bus to Seattle, and my parents lived in Seattle. I worked in Seattle doing bellygrams and dancing in a Greek restaurant for the summer. And then I saved up enough money to move to New York. I wouldn't say to do a very good move to New York, but I did move to New York. I took the bus again. I went to New York. Um, it was pretty hard. It was like in the beginning, one of my teachers, she had a student a former student who lived in New York. She said, reach out to her. She said, I have a place in Jersey City where you can live. You'll be sharing with an Egyptian taxi driver. So I'm like, I don't really want to live in Jersey City, but after like 4 days in the Y in New York, in a little cubicle room for like $30 a night, and it was back in 1986, I was going to spend all my money on that little room. I said, maybe I better go to Jersey City. So I went out to Jersey City. She took me out there, and he worked opposite hours from me. And it was an Egyptian neighborhood actually. So we would go to the Egyptian groceries. We would cook for each other. Like what I learned to cook some Egyptian food. I forgot completely how, but I would make liver and all this stuff. Did you know Egyptians love liver? I do too, actually, but I haven't eaten it since then. So anyway, we'd have all this Egyptian food. One of us would cook one day, one the other. We'd never see each other. And then I find out that he is her husband, that she married him for immigration. Well, he married her, paid her for immigration, right? And so she said, if any officials come, tell them that you're me. I was like, oh my God, this is fishy. And then one thing led to another, and he started getting paranoid that we were conspiring to have him deported. I was just like, oh my God, this is, after a while it was starting to get crazy. So I decided to find another place. I answered an ad in the Village Voice newspaper, and it was a lady. She was an artist from Japan. She had a beautiful apartment with an extra bedroom in the Bowery, which at that time was like Skid Row in Manhattan. And but the place was great and it was very centrally located. So I moved in with her, but I moved out 4 days later because I didn't realize she was paranoid schizophrenic and she went off her medicine. And she had these four cats that would run at night. And she was convinced that I was bringing terrorists because the people that helped me move were it was the maitre d' or a waiter, something from one of the Arabic clubs that I danced at, and he had a Palestinian kafia on when he helped me move. So she was really, really worried about me bringing terrorists. So when the cats were running around, she thought I was bringing terrorists. And one night she kept me up all night talking about terrorists. So I snuck and I moved out. And then I moved to this place. It was in Soho, and I was so desperate. It said sleeping space. So I go out there, and there's this old Indian man. He's so nice, but he had this teeny tiny apartment and he slept, it was a studio and it had a walk-in closet and a long hallway. He slept on the sofa in the studio, said, "You can share the walk-in closet." I built bunk beds out of doors and cinder blocks. I'm like, I'll take the entire walk-in closet. I'm not sharing it. And it was a closet, but it had a window. So anyway, I moved in there and I put my stuff on the top bunk. And then he rented the other sleeping space. He decided to rent his sofa in the studio to a guy from Wall Street who just got kicked out by his wife, and he built a platform over the little hallway entering. So we would have to go like this to walk in because he'd be sleeping on that platform. Then he brought his young wife from India, and they were both sleeping up there. And I'm like, how strong is this platform? So I was there a couple months. They were actually really nice, but it was a very crowded condition. I couldn't be there for too long. In fact, I was having major claustrophobia, but it was in Soho, like the incredible neighborhood full of arts and design and everything. And that apartment was worth so much that it was for sale. So these people came, realtors would come, and they'd be kind of amazed at the setup. But then he sold it for so much that he could buy this big house out in New Jersey. And the guy from Wall Street moved with them to the big house. They invited me, but I'm like, I'm not going back to New Jersey. So I finally ended up in Brighton Beach. And it was a lady, an old lady upstairs, and it was like a brownstone. And I was in the basement. And Brighton Beach is amazing. It's like a Russian neighborhood that is like every republic of Russia back then. It was Russia, USSR, had their restaurants and shops, and you walk along the boardwalk, and you have Coney Island right after that, and Sheepshead Bay right before that. That was like an Italian neighborhood. It was great. But anyway, I was there. I was going through all these, moving around, but I ended up in Brighton Beach where I guess I belonged. It was like an hour away from the city, but I was teaching English 6 days a week. And I went there to study, right? I wanted to study with Morocco, Serena, and Bobby Farah. And Bobby Farah was so successful with his traveling workshops, and he was going to Japan, Germany, all over the US. And he gave his classes to Yusri Sharif. Yusri wasn't that well known at that time, but he said, take Yusri's classes. And even when he came back to give classes, he told me, okay, get this. After I was dancing already 14 years and I danced all over South America and I thought I was Bobby Faraz saw me in class and he's like, you need to go back to Yusri's class until you get more experience. I'm like, okay. And so I studied with Yosri 2-hour classes twice a week. I loved those classes. They were really good. And I did that for over a year. And I studied with Serena, her advanced classes on Monday nights. I became friends with Morocco, but since I had to work so much teaching English to survive, I wasn't able to take her classes. There was no time to take her classes or Anahid Sophian's because my English classes were I think they finished at 9 p.m. Yeah. Yeah. So it was a great school. It was in this hotel right across the street from Penn Station. And I had people in my classes from all over the world. I made a lot of friends among teachers and students. And, it was a great experience. But I was teaching a lot more English than I was studying belly dance. So I did some bellygrams, like little parties. I found that sometimes it was too crazy, and then I wasn't comfortable with some of the gigs, like people were really stoned, or one time there was a guy, all the way out in Queens, I go, and I would have to go to the place and change into my costume in the bathroom or whatever. I go to Queens for this birthday party. I'm in the bathroom changing, and I hear the guy yelling, I don't know who she is, but if it's a surprise, I'm going to start shooting. And I come out and he has a gun. And I just took my stuff and left. It was real cold outside. I took everything and I just left with my cover up on and everything. And I was just like, I am not going to do these crazy gigs. So I would do some during the day where I would be sent as a surprise, like to banks and to offices and stuff like that. I figured that was pretty safe. And then I worked in some clubs and restaurants. I danced in an Egyptian restaurant out in Queens, in Forest Hills, Queens. And I also danced in Club Ibis, which was an Egyptian nightclub in Manhattan. Very fancy place with great musicians. It was Hamouda Ali, who he has done some recordings, and he was super helpful with lots of advice and stuff like that. And I remember Club Ibis, that's where everybody wanted to be, but they only paid $25, if you can believe it, plus tips. And the tips, they didn't put them in the costume, they threw them, and then they would gather them up, and it would be split between the musicians and the dancer. And so you have envelopes in the dressing room with the previous week's portion of your tips in an envelope with your name on it. But I mean, the pay was really low. So Samiha was the owner, and she would always tell people, you know, you need to change your costuming, you need to change your hairstyle, you need to do this, that. I had blonde hair then. I put streaks, I had a lot of streaks in my hair. And they didn't hire blonde belly dancers there. They wanted everybody to look Egyptian. And so I used to, my costumes weren't Egyptian, they were homemade. I made them myself, and it was my own style. So when I went in there, I'm like, I'm auditioning. I'd like to get this job, but I'm not going to change anything. And I just said, you're only paying $25. And I've danced my way around South America. And, you know, I'm not clamoring to get this job. I would, I'll do it if it's suitable for me. She didn't ask me to change anything. I didn't get any weekend spots. I was during the week, but still, that was I was proud of that. Nobody could believe it. They'd be like, "How did you manage that? You're still blonde. You're wearing like these weird outfits, whatever." And so that was Club Ibis. At the time there was Darwish, Darwish. I danced there a couple times. I was hit upon. It was like irritating. There was another one, I forgot, kind of same story. They just weren't that nice. So I didn't continue there. But the cool place was Fazl's. And Fazl's was okay, it was owned by a Turkish man named Fazl. He was the partner of Elena Lentini, who is and who just passed away last year. She was this incredible interpretive fusion type dancer, but belly dancer, so talented. with a bit of modern dance, a little bit of buto. She would dance with a hat, but she was a consummate artist, really incredible. And so her partner was Fazıl. Fazıl was a Turkish man that owned a building in Midtown Manhattan. And you would go up all these stairs. There were studios upon on top of studios. You had flamenco, you had belly dance. That's where Ibrahim Farah and Yusri Sharif taught. There was hip hop, there was Indian dance. There was every kind of dance going on at the same time. It was so exciting. You'd start going up the staircase and you'd hear the rhythms of the whole world. And it was like falling apart. It was the windows sometimes didn't close, the floors were all um, it was pretty crazy, but that was part of the charm. And there was a club called Fazıl's, and it was open on the weekends. And they would have Turkish musicians, amazing Turkish musicians, and they when they would come from Turkey, everybody that came to visit from Turkey would play at Fazıl's. And Elena, she danced each each time she danced, and there would be a guest dancer. So I got a spot there once a month, but I went there every weekend. Oh, it was open till 5 in the morning, and Turkish families would come, whole families, even with babies. You might see a baby, sitting in a little whatever on top of the table, and it was really wonderful. That was one. There was another club. It was called Mogador. And Mogador was in the East Village. It was real small. They had a couple, two or three musicians, and you danced with no space whatsoever. But it was really great. Um, and it was usually the musicians that played that Turkish Armenian fusion with Greek and Arabic that was so popular in New York. It's a sound that developed over from the 60s onward of musicians from different parts of the Mediterranean that might not be able to communicate with each other, but they could communicate through music. So they might be from Greece, Turkey, they could be Armenian from Lebanon or from any country, from Egypt, Morocco, you name it. And they're all playing together. And the sound was different from what you'd find in the Middle East, but very special and unique. That was the sound in a lot of places, but it kind of was less and less all the time. But Mogador, I got to dance to that type of music. Um, let's see. Oh, and I just need to continue a little bit how I left New York. Okay, so when I was in Mogador one night, um, I was drinking Turkish coffee and I tipped the cup upside down. And my coffee grinds were really an unusual pattern. So there was a lady at work. She was one of the English teachers. Her name was Leah. And she was from Romania and she was really good at reading coffee grinds. So she had been to Mogador with me in the past. The wait staff knew her that she reads really well. I said, I've never seen a coffee cup like this. And they put plastic over it. They let me take it to work and I brought it back, a week later. But Leah read it and she looks at me and she's like, you didn't tell me you're leaving. And I'm like, leaving where? And she's like, yes, it's set. You're going to go someplace they have flamenco dancers and, she told me a bunch of stuff about the gig. And I'm like, no, I don't know anything about this. Well, within a day or two, a dancer named Noura, who had helped me get gigs and she was really nice to me, she said, do you want to go to Mexico to work for 6 months? I'm like, really? And it was like a beautiful supper club in Mexico City. I was there for 6 months, and when I walked in, there were flamenco dancers, even though they weren't after a little while. But Yeah, I ended up in Mexico for 6 months, and the woman who had introduced me to her Egyptian taxi driver husband, she said, let's see what, yeah, she needed a place to stay. So I told her, you can sublet my apartment in Brighton Beach. So she was staying there and she came to visit me in Mexico. And she said, you know, your landlady is impossible. My landlady had Alzheimer's, and the landlady would be sitting in the living room. I would find her sitting in my living room too, and dazed and confused. And, she'd be sitting there and sometimes go through your stuff. Well, my friend, she couldn't really accept that, which I understand. So she said, I'm going to get an apartment elsewhere. She found a big one in Bensonhurst. It's in a very Italian neighborhood like the Fonz and Saturday Night Live, all that stuff from the 80s. And she said, you know, if you want to come with me, then, I'll move your stuff when you get back. Whenever you get back from Mexico, your room will be ready. If you don't, you're on your own. I had no choice. I ended up in Bensonhurst and it was okay. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't Brighton Beach. And so after a few weeks, Serena sent me to dance on a cruise ship that left from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, went all over the Caribbean. So it was like a 2 week gig, two 1 week cruises. By the time I got back, I said, let me go back to Miami and visit some friends. When I got there, I realized Miami is where I need to be. My intuitive feeling is like, I'm not going back to New York. I actually did not go back to New York. My friend, I'm not mentioning names because of the, you know, taxi driver incident with being married to him. But anyway, my friend, I said, I am not coming back to New York. She mailed my stuff to me. Yeah, I sent her the money for postage. She mailed everything in boxes, which I look back, I should have been more appreciative, but I was so excited to live in Miami because my friend Julian, he started buying buildings. And he's like, in Miami Beach, it was a slum, but he said it's going to have a renaissance. And it was true. It just picked up and became one of the hippest places on earth. And that's where I started my studio. And so my intuition served me right. It was my destiny to be back in Miami. So that's how I left New York.
Wow. It's like, okay, we need to make a movie. This the experience that you had in New York is like, what? It's like, and you got so many experience, and we just kind of, we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing. And I really did enjoy listening to how how these different culture came together and created this beautiful sound of music, by sharing their art. And it makes me think a little bit like, salsa. You had the how they mix their music and created salsa in New York. It's kind of, I have that feeling what happened with
Right.
the music with, the Arabic and Turkish, and how they came together. It must have been beautiful. Is there anything that we could, is there music that maybe eventually
Oh,
we could
yeah.
reference to?
There's let's see. Yeah, I have to send you a list because and some of those musicians, they're in their 80s and 90s. There are some that are still alive.
Wow. What
And
is
I just have to I'll find a playlist with, you know, a little bit of each one so
that?
you can hear the sound.
Oh, thank you.
And
That's
we can post it along with the interview.
yes. Oh, well, this is really what an incredible way of living through your art. Your art is like, like and how it gives you so much experience, so much life, from from different venues, like from just the way you live, your experience, and and the connection is just incredible. And I really do believe that you had many angels around you, but the more I get to know you, your heart is so beautiful. You have such a beautiful soul. No wonder you have angels watching over you. So,
Oh, thank you.
thank you so much for sharing this. And maybe somebody, maybe I feel like maybe a director, someone's gonna say, we have to make a movie out of this woman's life. So, but yeah, so thank you so much. And next week we'll talk about more stuff that you venture, and I'll see you in the next interview. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for interviewing me.
All right, so we're gonna go back to something we really wanted to share also about the workshops.
Okay, yes. Well, a lot of this information I got from hearing Morocco give talks. And one thing she explained is in the 70s, the person who created the workshop format was Paul Monti. And Paul Monti is not with us anymore, but he was the one that started having, different dancers teach workshops and travel around and for weekend workshops. And so that we didn't, it's not like everybody could just decide, I'm going to teach a workshop. Workshops were not a thing. Even classes were not a thing way before I started, like let's say in the 60s. The first generation, which was Morocco, Bobby, Serena, Dalena, Jamila, all those people in that first generation, they were the ones that started teaching classes. They learned by dancing in the clubs, by interacting with people of the cultures. And they categorized and figured out how to teach it to us, to the next generations. And by the time I started, I think my teachers had learned from that generation, from, the famous ones. And so when those famous ones would come to town wherever I would live, whether it was Miami or Seattle, it was like everybody went to study with them. And the organizers of workshops, it's not like anybody could organize a workshop. There were certain people in any given city. It was only certain people that would organize workshops. So let's say in Miami, there was three people, there two or three people that would organize a workshop every year. Nobody else dared to step in and say, "Oh, I'm organizing a workshop." It's like, no, you gave it that space. Everybody supported the workshops that those three people would organize. There were only certain people that taught workshops. And of course, we had the big five that I mentioned. We also had other people around the country, but it wasn't a lot. You had to have a big name. And the other thing that's very important is nobody overlapped. Like the workshops were pretty big. They'd be in the ballroom of a hotel, they'd have the show in the ballroom. And like you didn't have somebody else organizing a workshop the same weekend or the same month or even the following month or the previous month. You respected that date that workshop was happening. Everybody supported the same workshop. And that's something that's really missing now. I saw that start to fall apart the first time in 2005 when somebody deliberately overlapped. I will have to tell you, I witnessed that. And I've seen it all over the world now. And it shouldn't be that way. We should be supporting, focused on one thing so we can all learn. It doesn't matter if somebody doesn't like somebody else, you know, it doesn't matter. You can all be in the same room. Your students can all be in the same room studying and learning.